Good to hear your voices, fellas. 1 week in the books, and I thought the NFL product was pretty darn good, considering all things they had to deal with. I felt like I was watching like real football, and it didn't have the feeling of, oh, we didn't have OTAs and we didn't have mini camps. It was quite good as a matter of fact. And then there was Tom Brady, and so Tom will be fine. But anyone who thinks he's going to return to the glory of all those Super Bowls, he's, I hate to say this, he is 2-5 in his last 7 games. He's on a 3-game losing streak. Complete the last 3 weeks, the last 3 games, 2 last year, one of them a playoff game. This one, the guy's under 60% completion, and he's thrown as many picks as touchdowns in those games. So he's got to fight his way out of it. I think he will, but I don't think he's returning to the GOAT.
Well, Pat, let's just stay right there with that game then, because as David pointed out yesterday on our show, way under the third quarter, Brees had what, David, 91 yards in passing? Is that the right number?
Heading to the fourth quarter, Drew Brees had 94 yards passing.
So let me just ask you this question based on that number and what we saw of Brady. Are you buying either of these quarterbacks long term, if you know what I mean?
Well, I'm buying teams. So the quarterback, what did they show us that? And when I did that whole thing all spring and summer, breaking down every position group, what's the team that came in the top 5 the most of all the things, special teams, O-line, secondary? The New Orleans Saints. So what did we see from them? We saw that there's other ways to win games down there. We just are all, me included, locked in on Brees and all the things he's done. But they just showed us that they can win a lot of other ways. How about the pooch kick when you're up 31-17? How about the defense forcing turnovers? And then the offensive line. When it came right down to it, Brees is going to have his days, but that offensive line can run block and pass block. So Brees looks to me like a guy that can afford, unfortunately, if he has a shaky day, which he did, because, Tampa's defense is pretty darn good. I think New Orleans proved to me once again that they have a lot of ways to get you. Now, do I think Brees is going to have sub 100-yard passing days? No, I think they'll be fine there. And the tight end's got to catch the ball and keep catching it, and they'll be fine. Kamara, it's hard to have a lot of yards rushing or receiving when you're getting the ball in the red zone and scoring. What is he supposed to do? Turn around and run to the other end of the field and grab an extra 50 yards? So I don't know. I still love the Saints and the Ravens and the Chiefs. They look ridiculously hard to stop. But yeah, I think, I don't know if you agree with me, and you don't have to, but there's a lot of ways the Saints can play football. And with that coach, that pooch kick is just so symbolic of that guy and how he thinks. 31-17, I need to get the ball back one more time and put this thing away. So good play caller, good decision maker, good other parts of the football team.
Yeah, didn't take a play off there. Could have easily just pounded it out of the back of the end zone because they kicked off from near midfield with the 15-yard penalty. And instead, he's like, why don't we try to gain an extra 5, 7, 8 yards of field position here and really pin them deep? And instead, they end up getting the muff and the ball and some more points. Pat, our poll question today deals with the team that we think had the worst loss. Now, you may come up with somebody else on this list, but we came up with Philadelphia, Indianapolis. We came up with Detroit, up 17 at home in the fourth. And then we also came up with San Francisco, even though the three of us all think somewhat of Arizona. The fact of the matter is they went to the Super Bowl. It's a home division game. They were 7+ point favorite. So of those four, Philly, Indy, San Francisco, and Detroit, which one did you think was maybe the most disappointing Monday meeting?
And most alarming to me would be the Colts. I thought the Colts hardly did one thing right. And, that was Jacksonville. We had discussed the fire sale they've been on. The quarterback was nearly perfect, Minshew, 19-20. And there were people wide open all over the place. It was a major setback in my mind for the Colts and their aspirations to look like that. So, and the other ones all look bad. I might throw Cleveland in there too. They look, at a tilt from the beginning. But the Colts, I don't know how the poll's going, and I don't know how you two feel, but I'd be picking those guys.
And the Eagles are running away with it, which I mentioned that there are a lot more Eagles fans down here than there are Colt fans. And, you know, it is typical of our show, Pat, to go most disappointing. But when you talk about that Colts-Jacksonville game, and we know all the reasons why the Colts should have won. But, Pat, I just want you to talk about Gardner Minshew, because there's not a lot there. They got a couple of receivers. They have no defensive line. They have no running backs. And yet this guy goes out, throws a bunch of touchdowns. Did he throw an incompletion? I mean, he's like 91% or something like that. I mean,
95.
Come on. I mean, we got to give a little credit where credit's due here. This was Indianapolis that was going to roll over teams this year and win that division. They couldn't beat the Jags and Gardner Minshew.
No, they couldn't. The reason I wouldn't take Philly, just a quick note before we go on to that, and I'll answer that question for you, Mark, is the reason I wouldn't pick Philly for the most disappointing is they put 2 offensive linemen in IR. Lane Johnson couldn't play. And then they got guys hurt during the game. And they were playing the best pass rush unit in the NFL. You know, Washington has 8 pass rushers. And they just kept wave after wave. 7 different guys were involved in those 8 sacks. So, you know, that's why I'll give them a pass on the most disappointing. I know the Eagle fans, you know, the only team with a jail in the stadium. That tells you something about those guys. But the Colt thing is a shocker. And Minshew, you know, you're right, though, Mark. When are we going to give him the respect? Well, I'll ask you the question. If they come in last, should they pass on taking the Clemson quarterback because of Minshew?
No, because people think he's generational, and I understand that. But if they win more games than the Jets, which after week 1, I don't want to make huge overreactions, but that Jets team's god awful, Pat.
I just handed in my AP Pro 32. I always do that right before I talk to you guys, and on Tuesday mornings, and the Jets came in 32nd. So maybe that's the team I should have said. But, you know, the bottom is going to be stirred up. Of the bad teams on the bottom, I was kind of excited for Carolina. Because they sometimes, you know, especially early in the year, what about a losing team that you kind of like? I thought the Carolina Panthers, with a brand new head coach who's never done it before, and a Raider team with expectations, I thought the Carolina played pretty hard. So I wasn't down on those guys. I thought the Giants played pretty hard considering who they are and who they were playing. And I think Denver is another 0 for team that I thought was okay. They'll bounce right back from that. But I don't know. The Minshew story, you know, yesterday I did a little piece on the sophomore quarterbacks. And I love talking about the second-year starting quarterbacks because I keep reminding at least my listeners and now your listeners, these defensive coaches spend the whole offseason breaking down a guy who was a rookie starter and figuring out everything that guy's, you know, has habits of doing and then getting him into real problems. So Minshew, Kyler Murray, Dwayne Haskins, pretty fired up for those guys. I thought they kind of responded to the challenge of, you know, playing against people, especially Kyler Murray playing the NFC Championship team. So here's what Timmy Ryan told me about Murray. He said, hey, unless you're Washington with 8 pass rushers, you're not going to beat the guy very often because he exhausted us. We were aghast trying to hold on and find the guy and chase him down. And so what did we see all day Sunday? Athletic runaround quarterbacks were creating some terrific advantages. One up in Buffalo, certainly up in New England with Cam, Kyler Murray. But so Kyler Murray, I thought was terrific. And even when, after his 22-yard touchdown run to take the lead, he still had to come back and go 4 for 5 for 48 yards and plus 2 runs of 16 to ice the game. So, you know, I'm fired up about the sophomore quarterbacks and Haskins, that whole story with the locker room at halftime and giving a speech and Ivy and Ronnie, and then the kid goes out there and goes 10 for 15 in the second half. I was pretty excited to watch the second-year guys.
And for those that don't know, Pat, all right, tell them about the scene in Washington at halftime. They're down 17-7. It's hot. Their coach is battling cancer. He ends up having to take an IV. He's in one room while the rest of the team's in another.
Well, it wasn't just taking an IV. If I'm not, that was planned, right, Pat? I mean, this was part of his cancer treatment. This was the time. So here he is at halftime getting his cancer treatment.
Yeah, and so he had 2 treatments during the week. I had him on the air. The guy, look, he's been a guest of mine since the day he became the head coach at Carolina. He has never missed 1 week. And a lot of these guys, you get them on a 4-game losing streak, and they'd like to take a week off from answering my questions, and I'm cool with that. Ron has never missed a Tuesday, and he'll be on today. And the other thing is he's always on time. And last week he started to yawn during my interview, and he stopped and apologized. He said, "I don't know, this treatment is really kicking my butt, and I'm having a hard time sometimes staying awake, and I apologize for yawning on the show." So he was fatigued. His team saw him at practice every day, fatigued. And then to be down basically 17-0 before halftime, then 17-7, he's got to go in to get his treatment. And that team just looked at themselves. And Haskins stood up and had a little bit of an impassioned speech. The guy that everyone said, I don't know if he's a bust or not. Look, he got mistreated last year. He was put in thirds. His first camp, and they put him in third reps. 3 guys. I went to camp. I go, there's no chance this kid's going to be ready. Nor did I think some of the people there wanted him to be ready. So he gets a bad introduction to pro football. He plays late in the season. He's okay. And everyone's wondering, well, Ron goes with the kid, and then he comes back and I knew that team wasn't going to quit. I picked them to win on Saturday. I picked the Cardinals to win. Sorry, Jimmy Miller. And I said during the show Saturday, when Dennis Byrd broke his neck, we had a lousy team. He was gone. Jeff Lagerman was gone. The receiver was gone. Al Toon was gone. And when Dennis broke his neck, the next game we had was in Buffalo against Jim Kelly and those guys. And we were playing with Browning Nagel. You know what I saw? I saw guys that played with their heart. And I really believe that the Redskins were not going to lose that game. So it was great to see. And it was great to see Haskins take kind of a leadership role. But Ron Rivera is one of the all-time great guys. And those players know it. And a lot of those veterans that were there for the last regime, they're kind of excited. They're not going to let them down. And now they play the Cardinals with that 8-man pass rush versus our friend Kyler Murray. Can't wait to watch that one.
And, to echo what Pat said, we've never talked to Ron, but I watched a little bit of Good Morning Football, and I watched the replay yesterday. And all 4 of them, they did their little game balls, and they showed the clip of the Redskins giving the game ball to Ron Rivera after the win against the Eagles. And all 4 of them, you got Burleson, who's the player, and you got three talking heads, if you will. All 4 of them echoed exactly what Pat said about Ron, because he's not just that way with Pat's show. He's that way with every show that he goes on. And when you hear people in the media really telling you how good of a guy a coach is, they're not lying, because there's enough of them that aren't. And that's, I think, why what Pat said and why that team performed the way they did. It was remarkable. Well, Pat, let me go. You mentioned Rodgers. I started with David. We felt pretty good because David and I picked Seattle to both of us have them going to the Super Bowl. You have a different team. We both had Wilson as the MVP. But Wilson or Rodgers, who had a better Sunday? And if the answer is yes, I'm okay with it.
Yeah. Well, to me, Russell Wilson, to me, it's a lot more about Pete changing his philosophy. Remember how they've always been. They've always been a team that comes out and they're typically losing at the end of the first quarter. They averaged last year 4.8 points per first quarter, one of the worst. They gave up more points by halftime than they scored. And then in the fourth quarter, while losing, they turned the game over to Russell, and Russell wins. So they came out and said, the heck with that idea. Let's go and do something. And I said this to Pete one day on the phone. I said, do you ever really strongly consider passing to set up the run? And he goes, you know me. Yeah, well, he was playing, fox in a hole with me, because what did he do? He comes out attacking like crazy. Russell goes 9 for 9 to start the game. So I love that they did that. And on the other side, Minnesota, to me, put themselves in a strange place this year. And David talked about it last week. Walking all those veteran defensive backs, the corners specifically, out of that organization and loading up with rookies. Here comes Rodgers. What do you think's going to happen to you? And do you think Rodgers is ever going to let Love on the field? I don't think so.
No. And I know most people are feeling really good about Green Bay today. If I was a Green Bay fan, I'd be even angrier. Okay, because that's how good the quarterback is, and we're this close. And winning a Super Bowl is hard, and you need to be all in, and you need to not be drafting a franchise quarterback, a Hall of Fame quarterback, a world-class symphony conductor, a backup tailback, an H-back, and a third-string quarterback. That's not going to win you a Super Bowl, okay? Enough with the future. All right, you're the Green Bay Packers. You've lost 4 NFC championship games in the last 10 years. How about we get over the damn hump, we get back to the big game, and we win the sucker? All right, enough with that, because everybody knows where I stand.
I'm glad we provoked your emotion, David.
No, it's unbelievable. Honestly, I think it's organizational malpractice, quite frankly, what that draft was this year. I truly believe that. With that said, Pat, do we need to sit coaches down and explain to them 2 things? A field goal is not the worst thing in the world. And here's an even crazier idea. A punt is not a bad thing either. I mean, what is this obsession now with everybody's got to go for it on 4th down? Okay, 4th and 4 near midfield when you're winning. Why? Punt. You're down 3. Right. You're down 3 on the road in the 4th quarter against a good team. It's 4th and 3 on the 11. How about you kick the chip shot field goal and you're tied?
And skip the good team, David. It's week 1. We don't know who the team is. Kick the field goal, tie the damn game.
Pat, what is going on?
Yeah. But you guys know, not that you personally got what you deserved. You didn't. But a lot of people got what they deserved because they let analytics rule them. It's one thing to review analytics and use it prudently, but when you start getting these reports from guys that never coached, that think their statistical data is going to drive every decision, you get a lot of crappy reports telling you to go for it on 4th down. And if you want to live by those Bibles, go ahead. You'll find out. The reason they have a human being as the head coach is anyone could read a report. What are we going to have? A computer on the sideline telling us what to do? The human being has to have instincts. And if you listen to Parcells, he used to talk about it's okay to punt the ball, put them on a long field. Yes, but the answer to your question is too many of these clowns are reading reports, and too many clowns are coming to the head coach's office telling him what he should do based on statistical crossovers. I could go on, but I think I made my point.
Very quickly, because I don't want to interrupt Mark here, but 2 of the clowns who made these decisions are 2 Super Bowl winning coaches. Doug Peterson and Mike McCarthy made 2 of the biggest in-game coaching decision blunders of the weekend. That's how much analytics are now ruining the day. These are Super Bowl winning coaches who are doing dumb blank things.
Hey, remember when the old days, David, this is to you, Mark's too young, but the only way to get a head coaching job back in the early 90s was to swear you were a West Coast guy from the Bill Walsh tree. Remember that?
Yep.
Now, you know what it's like in these interviews now with these owners? And the Carolina owners, he's a big proponent too. You got to go in there and tell them all about analytics. You got to tell them how you really – and I love Ron Rivera, great example. They started saying things, well, Ron's not into analytics. Ron was into analytics before they had analytics. So this idea to get a job, you better be one of those guys who can talk chapter and verse about all the research. And I know a guy that has 8 people in his analytics department. You know what? He needs another defensive tackle. He doesn't need more guys reading reports.
Pat, I remember a conversation you and I had before the Philly New England Super Bowl. David wasn't doing the show. I happened to be in New Orleans with one of my other jobs, and on that flight I read through 40 pages of analytics. I'm all fired up to talk to you, and there were some glaring things in there. And I remember you kind of said the same thing about Bill when it came to analytics. You're like, you do realize this is Belichick, and if the analytics say that in 11 personnel we're going to do this, then Bill's not going to do it in this game because he's read the analytics ahead of you. And isn't that ultimately what you're talking about with this stuff? Is that someone smart enough to understand that if a coach is going to rely on analytics, then my analytics tell you A, I'll do B, and you're going to be lost.
If you can use them as a counter punch, yeah. But a lot of guys, look, I had a friend of mine said, I'm never coaching again. I won't mention his name. You guys know him. And he said to me, I can't take it anymore. He goes, I like reports. I wrote reports for the guy. I studied all this stuff. I had computer reports that I generated. He liked it. But at the end of the day, he was going to go with his instincts. And he'd occasionally say to me, hey, I'm going to do this anyway. And I said, well, okay, well, let me go see if anyone else has been doing that. So he'd counter some of the things. But at the end, and a line coach called me and goes, I am never going back in. To be in a room on Tuesdays, which a bunch of guys in the front of the room who've never coached, not going over their reports, telling us what to call. And the owner in the back of the room making sure that we were listening. He goes, it's too far down the road now. And I am not against research. I was a researcher. I get it. But it shouldn't rule the day. Because as Bill Cowher would say, the one thing that report doesn't tell me on the sideline is when I look in the eyes of one of my players and realize he's scared or he's playing injured or the wind just picked up and it wasn't here before. So there's a human element to this. And if you're a real poker player, you do what Belichick does. You counter the report. You look at it from what do you think that guy's going to do? Because he has the same report in his hands that I have. It's a great chess match, football. And you have to keep creating advantages for yourself. And sometimes today, I think the advantage is go against the report.
He's Pat Kirwan. He's part of CBS's NFL Today show, and he co-hosts Moving the Chains with Jim Miller weekday afternoons on NFL Radio. You can follow Pat on Twitter at @PatKirwan_NFL. Pat joins us twice a week during the season, Tuesdays and Fridays, courtesy of Pinchers. From Tampa to Key West and many points in between, Pinchers, where you can't fake fresh. Pat, as always, thanks for your time and your insight. Stay safe. Be well. Right. That's it.
We're done?
Hey.
Damn it.
Hey, I'll see you Friday, boys.
Hey, Pat, don't worry. Everything was closed Friday except for the pool, and I couldn't even figure out how to charge anything at the pool. So you got off scot-free Friday.
Oh, David, I get a picture of him in a golf cart at a golf course I recognize very well. And I said, you can stop in and get yourself something on me.
Listening to Moving the Chains on Friday, going around your golf course, and if anything would have been open, I'd have been charging it all to your account, man.
But it makes me feel like we've at least got a tie score because I've been sneaking in your garage stealing those.
The stone crab. Yeah, I thought there were a couple frozen. I thought I was a few frozen bags light. So good to know that you remembered the code, Pat.
Yeah, of course. You want me to put it on the air?
Not a problem. They'll be there for you whenever you get back to Florida, my friend.
I'll be back soon.